Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
The disputes over the Rainbow Crosswalk and the mayor's decision not to allow the flying of the pride flag in front of the government building has set off a cultural clash in Salisbury. You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. Efforts to involve the city council as a check to any decision to remove existing public art died in this week's council meeting for a lack of a second. The mayor has voiced his concern about continuing with the Rainbow Crosswalk that has been maintained by PFLAG, a gay rights organization. And some fear the removal of other public art at the whim of any individual or office. We sat down with Council President Deshaun Doughty before this week's vote to talk about the clash. What was the impetus for raising this issue to begin with? What was wrong with the old system?
The great thing about my position now, and the great thing about, what I love to do is actually research. I research a lot, I joke with my friends. I say, our city charter is saved in my phone, and I rely on that. So, I've read that and seen, again, some pockets where some things could be changed. And so same thing with when the issue or the instance came up with the flag, right? And so the pride flag, and again, because of Salisbury's history of what has been done, some individuals were upset at the decision that administration made to not have that flag flown at the flagpole. And again, that was a decision that was made, and so that was it. And city council couldn't overstep and couldn't demand that, and that's what I explained to the individuals. I said, we know our role, and our role in government is legislative, and also to provide support for the city. And so seeing that, I was like, I was asking the attorneys and just a lot of the department heads, and I said, do we have a policy in place, or do we have anything in place for this one thing, for flags and commemorative, our art and public art? And so and you hear crickets. So my mind instantly goes, being solution oriented, is okay. Well, we need one in place, because this is not going to be the only instance where this is going to come up, where either things have been done in the past or we haven't asked from the community, and we need to, of course, have something in place to rely on to give us that guideline, yay or nay. And so realizing, and again, I love culture myself, being a musician, and seeing all the art, and we've put out, and the city has invested resources, and we have a department now, Arts, Business, and Culture Department. So, which we recognize the importance of art in our community. And so I was thinking, it was brought to me that there's nothing in place, and people were saying that administration may be taking down a certain sidewalk or crosswalk, and I just and again, if it's not made public or known, then I'm not going to feed too much into those things. But I just said, well, we need to do something as council to protect what's already in place. If the city has invested resources in art, which is a vital piece in our community, it's expressive and definitely shows our great deal of character and culture. So that's where where, and again, our power as council is to legislate. So draft legislation that protects that. So that came up in work session this past Monday, and our Arts, Business, and Culture director, Mr. Swagger, Mr. Allen, he brought some input that the process actually for initiating the art is rather extensive. It takes a lot of steps, and there's a lot of players at B. But if the question becomes, if we don't want that anymore, there's no process in place. So I again, we said that there's obviously an issue in that. And so then that's where we alter the legislation so that council doesn't need to be, this actually proposed, so this will be on Monday's agenda, that we don't need to be a part of the installation of it. That's already protected. There are enough hands in that pot. There are enough provisions in place. But for the removal, of course, the Public Arts Committee should be a part of that. They're a vital part in the installation and of the actual care and of the art. So Public Arts Committee, and then the actual artist, whomever curates that art, should have about removing or altering that art. Again, we need to. I think it's important to respect that artist's, what they have crafted, and then the actual mayor and council. So those provisions will have to be checked off for the removal or the change of public art.
Is it possible, for instance, the mayor or an administration, any mayor for that matter, to make a decision to go ahead and remove such art without any input from or any blocking to that decision for that matter by, say, the city council?
Yeah, so this legislation would protect that art. So no, that wouldn't be quite possible.
Right. So if the mayor, for example, wanted to say remove X, the city council would need either to say okay or at least get approval of the city. Is that how that's working?
Yeah, it needs to go through the Public Arts Committee first. Again,
Okay, right.
They are what we deem, the experts in this. So the artist who actually curated that that piece of art, and the Public Arts Committee needs to decide, okay, is it time? Maybe that art has served its purpose, or it has done its role in the community. So if they say yes, then in my mind, I've leaned on the expertise of that body that is now providing me advice. So then it would go through mayor and council. The mayor and council portion is just to provide a good checks and balance. That's, government is legislative, executive. We don't have judicial here, we are county, but in the city, we have legislative and executive. So that, again, this ordinance would have the complete checks and balance. So it's not just council. It is mayor and council.
So if the mayor decided no, he doesn't want it removed, or vice versa?
If the council said, yeah, if tomorrow I said I don't like that piece of art, I can't just go and instruct anyone to paint over it or to destroy it or to alter it in any shape or form.
So one of the things that struck me was had this discussion, as benign as the bureaucratic expression is, it does seem to surround in part the mayor's suggestion that they do away with the rainbow crosswalk.
Yeah.
How much of does that play into this? And I know the mayor expressed obviously reservations about the legislation, but just taking that issue for a moment, because that drew a lot of concern that perhaps sidewalk might go away. Other people don't want the sidewalk there, or the rather crosswalk. Where does that fit into this narrative that you're talking about?
Yeah, definitely. So, that community, again, they express themselves greatly in their part with that sidewalk. And at that time, our administration and mayor and admin, supported that, and they were a part of that and allowed some of our individuals who, before weren't able to fully express themselves or didn't feel comfortable doing so. And what it represents, of course, is those who, don't feel comfortable in our city, but, across the nation as well. So that's the history behind it. And how I kind of related to it again, and when that decision, or of course the flag was made, and then the rumor and instance, or whatever the murmurs of that the crosswalk could also be a part of it. And again, I'm usually an observer. I will listen to just about anyone or anything. I'll listen. I'll hear. So I was listening, and of course, if there's enough passion behind anything, enough, if someone is emoting enough, you feel that. So I related it to me being a Black, of course, or African American individual. And here in America, we are a minority, and we live on the Eastern Shore, and so some values that some people have, and living my whole life here, and being in some spaces of not being fully comfortable. But after 2020, and again, you had different movements, but the big one is the Black Lives Matter movement, and a lot happened, and I related to that time period where we sort of made a shift. Some things happened. It was some good and positive and negative things happened in our communities, but the shift in our community and personally with me is I felt comfortable expressing myself and speaking for people who did not feel as comfortable, and that's where I really got more of my voice, and that's when I became more proud to be a Black individual, and what that means in the culture and everything. Therefore, it's not just the color of my skin; it's everything. We all have our own cultures, and just being Black is a part of my culture, and I proudly exhibit it. So that's where I related it to is after that moment I felt in my city had the Black Lives Matter crosswalk, and we were doing programming in our communities, and we were recognizing that this was a time for us to uplift and to celebrate a community. And so the same thing happened with Pride and those individuals who are part of the LGBTQ plus communities. And so even the instance of the murmur of that could be taken away, that can do a lot to a person, an individual in a community. Because I know that if there was an instance of someone saying, hey, we might take away the Black Lives Matter mural, or we won't celebrate Black History Month, or something like that, it would upset me, and I wouldn't feel that I would maybe feel comfortable to express myself in the city that I call home.
Let me just, there was a couple of public comments that struck my ear when you were discussing this. The first I have here is with Robert Taylor. He's a longtime resident. He's almost always there for the city council and the county council members, and he obviously had some serious reservations about these kinds of projects. And here's what he had to say.
It's really a propaganda statement, and this is what I'm concerned about. I think what we're trying to do here, or maybe behind this, is to essentially legitimize propaganda. We've heard the Black Lives Matter. We've heard gay rights. I mean, that's not art, just because you want to do something like that.
We also had, of course, T.K. Tuminello, who's with the Public Art Committee, and he obviously had a much different view. This is what he had to say.
They were put there to commemorate the lives lost in the LGBTQ community, including Salisbury, to hate crimes, violence, suicide. Unfortunately, PFLAG just didn't really make that a big deal. So you're really doing a disservice to the community to paint over those. You are saying that those lives don't matter. So we want to talk about Black Lives Matter. I agree, people want to remember. And that is something that should be protected with every inch of our human existence.
The reason I play both of those, that seems to reflect perhaps what's going on in the community at large, that there are people who perhaps don't feel as if the crosswalk should be there, or even perhaps even the Black Lives Matter recognition. And yet, on the other hand, there's obviously a strong community here, African Americans, the LGBTQ+, who feel that no, these should be represented. How does one square the circle in terms of how this plays out? Because obviously, and the mayor himself, in his discussions about, for instance, the crosswalk, or even for that matter, the flag, clearly seemed to be saying, in effect, that maybe we want to be, quote, be inclusive, whatever that meant for him, and not necessarily recognize these individual groups or individual causes, as the case, for instance, certainly Robert seemed to allude to.
Yeah. So, I was definitely disappointed to hear these things be related to propaganda. That is definitely a word that has some history to it itself. To promote certain causes and say that this is propaganda for that. That's just it's disappointing. Again, Don, we're only 50 or 60 years from legally in the United States for us to have been in the same room talking like we are, and
that's right.
For that, if it had been acceptable. And so again, these things, it's still fresh in people's lives as far as the change and progress has been made. And every time someone makes small notions away from that progress, it hurts a lot. And so the way someone like myself, who can be unapologetically Black and proud, again, because that's my culture, I have to celebrate it, because I have to celebrate that, in my grandparents' lifetime, that wasn't allowed to be celebrated. And so that is my right, and I will execute that to celebrate me being myself. And this is that. So again, these people who are part of these communities were celebrating their city, supporting them being themselves, and to have one resident related to propaganda. But again, I'm confident that it doesn't speak for the majority of Salisbury, and of course not what we want to be known as.
What sense do you get about this from the mayor, who obviously had his own concerns about these kinds of things being up and being exclusive, as it were? I think I'm putting sort of words, I guess, in his mouth, but seems to be saying that no, we should like something more general.
Yeah. So I think Mayor Taylor takes more of a side with well, let's take our hands off of it. Government shouldn't be involved in these situations or decisions. And sometimes when you do that, sometimes that can be a deciding factor, or that can be an actual point that is made across. Is when you take your hands off, and when you just say it's non-governmental, or that government shouldn't have its place or say in that particular point. So I think that's the stance he wants to take, is that this shouldn't have any relations to anything with government. So why is it even here? Why are we even talking about it?
Because that seems to stand certainly in contrast to his predecessor, Mayor Jack Day, for that with Mayor Day, and then of course Jack Keith as well, in which the city was moving in a particular direction. Certainly with the celebration of Gay Pride and Festival and so on. I mean, is he out of step?
That's no. So Mayor Taylor was duly elected, by the citizens of Salisbury. So he is our mayor, And so as me, I love I love government. So I respect his position, and I respect his opinions. But we are allowed, with any individual, we are allowed to differ in opinion. And that's where me as council president and city council, sometimes we have different opinions. And so, I'll say, out of step. That's definitely, I haven't heard that word since like grade school, since school. But I would say he's not in alignment with what I deem to be progress in us to continue to move forward as a city, and continuing to be inclusive, and continuing to be that place that is desired by people to come here, but to stay here, to live here, work here, play here, and all those things. That's what I say. I don't think we're not in alignment with that, or he's not in alignment with that. And again, he's respected to have those opinions, whatever opinions he has. I fully respect whatever he does. But again, which is a lot of weight, Don. But in these positions, we hold a lot of weight and a lot of I'll say power with our decisions and our voice as well. And that's some things I'm always conscious of, is that when I was elected in November. I took that oath, and then when I became president of the council, which I'm forever grateful for, that came with a lot of weight and a lot of power with my decisions and voice. So I have to carefully respect that and carefully handle that.
It reminds me that when they were talking about an apology by the city, right? Certainly, Mayor Taylor certainly was supportive of that. Yeah. His predecessor, Jack Keith, who was the president of the city council, that succeeded Mayor Day, he would go only so far as to say, yes, we need to say something, but we don't want to use the word apology. So it does seem as if beyond just simply this current mayor, there does seem to be this hesitancy about this particular issue. Yeah,
exactly. So, and again, that's people's lives that you're, so in our history, and that's where I think we started with that conversation with earlier with Ann Street, is sometimes you peel back the onions and you realize that Salisbury isn't, quite perfect. And some people will consistently remind you of that, Don.
No, really?
Yes. Some people will consistently that, and I always listen, like I said. But I'm like, man, goodness. All right, well, tell me one good thing, But that's where, again, that balance of government. But then we did resolve that with a resolution, and we had the conversations with the affected family members. But it's going to be an ongoing thing, is to educate our citizens and us as well on, what we did in the past, and also, continue to move forward. One thing is, I just learned today, not just learned, but it was just, brought to our attention, that the old courthouse, that Frederick Douglass, I think, did a speech there or something there. And, we're going to, potentially the county's going to work with the city and erect, a plaque or an actual, a commemorative piece to acknowledge that and celebrate, Mr. Douglass. So, some of those things, again, when you go back and you go, well, that was pretty, momentous, and that was pretty, we should really celebrate that. So those kind of things. There's other ones like the plaques and, that are on the poles, those kind of things.
Finally, couldn't let you go without happening to at least refer to the Democratic Party as nominated Kamala Harris, the first African-American woman to become a major party nominee, the second black person to actually occupy that spot. What was your reaction when you saw all of that? It was certainly an energetic convention.
I was like, man, I wish I was in Chicago, because just that energy, right? And I told people, I actually made a post about it. I said, put party affiliation aside or what have you. But, I remember when I was 8 years old, I think, however old you are in second grade. Mm-hmm. I remember I told my mom, I said, Mom, I'm gonna be the first black president, right? And she didn't tell me no. She said, okay, son, for young Deshaun for him to have known then that he would have seen a black president, the first black president, who, again, affiliation aside or policy aside, that man is, he's a wordsmith and he's charismatic. And man, if I could have just an ounce of his je ne sais quoi, as they say. But, that, and then also our governor, Wes Moore, definitely a decorated man, and it's done a lot, for our country and definitely for our state, leading well and leading and being expressive with themselves, not, hiding in the corner, but they are leading the charge. And then now having a nominee of the first black woman, and again, she's coming out strong, and she's, doing those, so definitely an exciting time, and moments where you're going through what someone will call history. That's amazing to live through it. It's an exciting time. And
City Council President Deshaun Doughty talking about the ongoing controversy over potential removal of existing public art. You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
There's more optimism in the region's business community. You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. With the pandemic disappearing into the rearview mirror and an easing inflation rate, a new Salisbury University study finds that expectations within the community has risen. We talked with John Hickman, director of the Business, Economic, and Community Outreach Network, about the results of the new survey. What have you found in terms of the feelings of the business community? I understand your survey found that there's maybe a bit more optimism than there has been in the past.
Well, and so particularly compared to the survey that we distributed in December, where business optimism was especially low, and it mirrored trends that had been seen nationally. We saw a dramatic uptick, almost 40% increase of those businesses that were looking at substantially better or better conditions in their industry. And so it's great to see that. Also, as I said, we've looked at other studies that are at a national level, and they're starting to see that same upward trend in business optimism.
So one of the areas that you point to is the issue of inflation. What are businesses saying about that?
So inflation is still a high concern for them, but as we've seen, the rate of inflation has started to moderate, and I think businesses starting to see that they can at least anticipate where price increases might be, and that they're probably reasonable to accomplish, are leading to some of that optimism, because again, we aren't seeing a retrenchment in prices, but inflation levels have started to level off in the last several months.
Also, I understand that there's also concerns about cost increases, whether it's insurance, that kind of thing. What are we looking at there?
So insurance popped up as a particular concern in this, and anyone who's looked at their own homeowner's insurance has seen a real rise in insurance rates over the last several years, driven by a couple of things. Number one, some large natural disasters that have occurred across the country. But additionally, one of the components of that is replacement costs. So that historic inflation that we saw over the last year and a half to 2 years is built itself into what is the cost of replacing a building or replacing machinery, equipment, vehicles that the companies may have. So that's translated into the cost of insurance for those companies.
And what about payroll?
So payroll cost, actually, we see less worries about that in the business community. Also, I think that's a reflection of the fact that in the past, particularly post-pandemic, there was still a fear of being able to hire employees, and that's while employees aren't necessarily easy to find, there is less of this short-term turnover in companies' employees. They're able to, pay rates have started to moderate some, just as inflation.
Also, I understand that household income, that a lot of them feel as if it's lagged behind when it comes to cost of living.
I know it sounds like everything is rooting back to inflation, but honestly, it's that households have seen continued inflation and the prices have stayed high in the general purchases, food, cost of utilities or fuel. Those have stayed up, and the cost of housing itself, whether it be in purchasing of a house or rental prices, have really grown. And I think that you're seeing that individuals and businesses in their compensation are seeing that those price increases that maybe they're getting, or maybe if there's wage increases, aren't quite at the level or the percentage that some of those particular items have increased in their household.
And also, I guess, but there is some optimism about the standard of living going up over the next 5 years. I mean, despite everything that's happened in the past, I guess.
Right. And I think the individuals that respond to this are starting to see things catch up. So prices have started to match up with where some of the costs are. So they're starting to see that slowly but surely catch up. And I guess the hope is that once we've gotten this extremely high inflation that we had for the last couple of years, now that seems to be under control, that hopefully it's not going to jump back up to those double-digit numbers.
Right, because, I mean, one of the causes for the high inflation rates obviously was heavy-duty government spending, deficit spending, certainly a lot of cash flowing into it, which the administration actually had expected. But that seems now that those programs are now disappearing, that sort of is now beginning to come down.
Right, so that government stimulus that really was flowing into the economy to make sure that we didn't have a dramatic recession, that's run its course. A lot of households have spent money that either came from that stimulus or because they were not able to travel. So they weren't spending money on travel. Maybe they were buying goods. And now that savings that a lot of households had accrued is starting to also filter out.
In terms of the positive outlook, you indicate in your survey that the local business folks at least think that we will not be looking at a recession, that they look at things as going pretty well.
Yeah, so that was it was a great thing to see. As I said, the turnaround from December until now was really surprising to me that it made that great a turnaround in that time period. But it's a good thing to see. There's still a few individuals that said that we might be heading towards a recession, but that's come back to what might be a reasonable expectation of the number of people.
Looking ahead, do you think we finally emerged from the impact that we had with the pandemic? Is that now in the rearview mirror and people are now looking forward in a way that perhaps that's disappearing?
I think the pandemic troubles are certainly in people's rearview mirror. There's certainly some hurdles that we may run into. There could be spikes in energy costs again. Certainly natural disasters, as I mentioned, may impact insurance costs. But I will say, knock on wood, that the impact of the COVID pandemic is now behind us.
So you optimistic?
I'm optimistic, yeah. When you read good numbers, you can't help but be optimistic, Don.
We've been speaking with John Hickman, director of Salisbury University's Business, Economic, and Community Outreach Network, on its latest survey of business sentiment. You're listening to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.
While tourists sleep in Ocean City, a crew embarks on the thankless job of cleaning up the beaches. Delmarva Public Media's Brian Shane caught up with him as they headed out.
Randy Nair grew up in York, Pennsylvania, and 8 years ago he had the opportunity to move to the beach town he grew up visiting, Ocean City, Maryland.
Yeah, so of course everybody up there comes down here for vacation, and like I say, we have since I was a little kid. So just thought it was great to get an opportunity to move here, and it was a big risk to come here. It's expensive to live here, but we made it work.
The opportunity was for a job. In fact, he called it his dream job.
I said since I was a little kid, I always dreamed of of running these tractors. I was always infatuated with them when I'd see them out on the beach working.
This is not just any tractor. This is the tractor that pulls the sweeper that cleans the beach.
It's a great job. I really love doing this.
What is it that makes this so special for you?
I honestly, the little kid in me likes driving the big tractor. I hate to say, I'd like to say something more manly, but that's the truth of the matter. I just like being up here in the big tractor. I like the difference we make out there. I brim with pride when somebody says how nice the beach looks, because I know we're directly responsible for that. And I love this town. This has been my vacation town since I was little. And now for me to be a part of working here, it's kind of a full circle thing for me. I'm pretty happy.
I had the chance to shadow Randy and his colleagues on a busy summer night in August. Even at midnight on a Monday, while tourists are fast asleep, they're on the clock, removing every speck of trash and debris from all 10 miles of the resort's beloved beach. I'm following closely behind them, and I'm watching 4 enormous tractors drive side by side, headed north up the beach. The time is 11:30 p.m.
So where are we right now?
We are south of the pier, getting ready to go under the pier and head north, so I can get you a different view of how things are done.
This is Fred Wimbrow. He's the supervisor of the beach cleaning crew. Fred has been working for Ocean City for 25 years. For 10 of those years, he drove the beach cleaning tractors himself. Right now, I'm riding shotgun in his F-150 up the beach as the tractors start their shift. We're down here at the inlet, and it's a little hazy, so all you can see of the tractors are their floodlights floating along in the void. It's a little ghostly, but also kind of beautiful, watching them swoop around each other in a choreographed ballet. It's a dance they perform each and every night in the summer. Each tractor here is pulling a different device, and each has a specific task. One device has sharp metal tines, like the teeth of a comb, that dig into the sand and grab debris. Others are sifting devices that can screen out the tiniest of refuse from the sand. Fred told me how the tractor drivers here have a specific technique where they work together as a team to comb the beach side by side.
So if you can see here, they're starting on the surf line. They will ride the surf line in, staggered, one in front of the other. The one behind him, his right tire is on the tire track of the one ahead of him, so it's done track for track. So they will run this in that pattern all the way to Delaware. They're headed to Delaware now. It takes you an hour and a half, and when they get to Delaware at 146th Street, that's when they'll go up to the dune line and come down south on the dune line and box that section in. So they'll come down, like I was telling you earlier, in about 10 block increments. 139, 130, 120, 111. That's what they'll use as their turnaround points.
So it reminds me a little of like when you're painting a room, you sort of have to hit the trim first and then you go back in the middle.
Yeah, and you close it in, right? We'll work from your outside and you just slowly work to close it into the center, yeah.
As we keep cruising north, another driver comes through over the radio. So we go to check it out. At a spot near the shoreline, it looks like there's just 3 teenagers on the beach, plastic Starbucks cups in hand. But Fred swings around with the spotlight and we see about a dozen more kids hanging around a lifeguard stand.
It's 8 minutes of midnight. Look how busy it is out here. You would think that there would only be a couple people, but no, it's busy. It is. And see how much trash is over there next to that can? I don't know how many pieces of trash would you say that was? 40, just on the ground. And we take care of all that. It's then you start the question, like, why would you leave that behind? Like, what, why? I don't know. You'll beat yourself up just trying to understand, like, why wouldn't you just carry that to the can?
Is that frustrating to you?
No, because, you can't take it personal, because then it would upset you. But, you just understand people are people. And we give them all the tools that we can, put as many cans out here as we can. Whether they choose to use it or not, that's up to them.
These tractors get pretty beat up by the sand and salt air, so they're leased and they get replaced every 6 months. But the equipment behind the tractors, the devices doing all the hard work of scooping and sifting through the sand, those are old. So old that the manufacturer went out of business in the 80s. That means when it comes to repairs, there's no buying parts off the shelf. Everything has to be custom made. And this is Fred's specialty.
We break down all the beach equipment every winter. I mean, break it down to the frame and replace all the bearings, nuts, bolts, the whole works. We pull them back from the dead, basically. It's a labor of love. I'm going to tell you, if you don't love your job, it's going to be a job. And the guys that do it, they feel the same way I do. They take a lot of pride in what they do because there's only 6 that do it, in the whole summer.
Next, I got to meet some of the other drivers on the team.
Joel Fry, Culpeper, Virginia. It's amazing how industrious people are about digging holes in the sand. I've seen some impressive sand structures in the last 2 years. It's amazing how much people can do in the short time that they're out there. And, building chaise lounges out of the sand so they can set up around their campfires and whatnot. It constantly amazes me how many and how big the holes are out there that you have to navigate around every night. So,
Mike Quinn, Baltimore, Maryland. We take it for granted. When I was doing it, I got to see the sunrise every morning. But you get these people that have never seen that. And they get out there, and I've actually seen people cry watching the sunrise come up. And you see all these people out there in the morning. That sun's rising, you see it come over the ocean, it's like they're in awe. And it was, it makes you think, wow, how lucky I am to be able to see this every morning. And a lot of times you get mad because they're in your way, but then you start realizing, hey, you got to let it go.
Pat Tilley, Newark, Maryland.
Yeah, Pat's probably been with me the longest, right?
Yeah, I've been doing this since 2009, so I'm the veteran of the group. And it's a good thing to belong to, especially when you hear that Ocean City beaches is one of the top 10 cleanest beaches in America on the East Coast. It makes you feel good, and some people come up to you and say, you're doing a good job. Makes you feel good. You're part of something.
Beach cleaning, of course, is a seasonal job for a seasonal town. It doesn't last all year.
What does it sound like when you turn it off?
This crew, their graveyard shift is going to end just after Labor Day weekend, but they do keep busy in the off-season. The beach cleaning crew is just one part of the Public Works Maintenance Division here in Ocean City. There are also teams who clean and scrub the boardwalk every night. There's a crew that empties all the blue metal trash barrels along the beach, and another crew that picks up all the oversized trash, like discarded beach chairs.
Scrubbing the concrete, power washing bus stops, that's all our department. That's all done through maintenance. It's a lot of work, for one department, and it's not a ton of workers. It's, a lot is put on the backs of every individual, and we make it work.
Fred and I left the beach around 1 o'clock in the morning, but the rest of the tractor drivers will finish their shift closer to 7 a.m. Fred told me he is so glad he made a career out of this job.
My favorite part is when, like I said, people go to bed, and the beach is trash. It's been beat up all day by visitors, and when they get up the next morning, it's pristine, the trash is gone, it's clean, and they don't know how it got that way because they usually don't see us because we're working while they're sleeping, and that's probably my favorite part. It's doing a good job, and that's why people come.
Taking the beach from trashy to tidy for 100 nights a year doesn't come cheaply. The town budgets about $1.14 million for the beach cleanup detail, but some tourists might tell you having a spotless beach every morning, well, that's priceless. For Delmarva Public Media, I'm Brian Shane.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Delmarva Today with Don Rush.